Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this virtual event co-organized with UNESCAP as a side event of the fourth session of the Committee on Information, Communication Technology, Science, Technology, and Innovation. My name is Alejandro Labopa. I am Research and Industrial Policy Officer at UNIDO, and I will be moderating this event. During the event, we will present and discuss the main findings of UNIDO's flagship report, the Industrial Development Report 2022, which is entitled The Future of Industrialization in a Post-Pandemic World. The event will be divided in two parts. During the first part, Mr. Nobuya Araguchi, who is the Chief of UNIDO Industrial Policy Research Unit, will summarize the main findings of the report. And then in the second part of the event, a panel of distinguished experts in the field of industrial development will discuss the implications of the findings of the report for the Asia-Pacific region. Following the panel discussion, we will also open the floor for your questions. So we really look forward to your active participation. You can pose your questions using the Q&A tool of Zoom that you can find below in the screen. And we really look forward to any intervention that you might want to have. So with no further delay, I will now open the session with a pre-recorded video from UNIDO Director General, Herb Mueller.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, best greetings from Vienna and UNIDO to you all at the fourth session of the Committee on Information and Communications, Technology, Science, Technology and Innovation. I congratulate ESCAP for its 75th anniversary, and I congratulate you for having made great progress in socio-economic development over the past decades. ESCAP is an essential regional platform to advance the 2030 agenda in the Asia-Pacific region. Today, more than ever before, we need such strong partnerships. All nations must work closely together to build a better and more resilient future. We are all in this together. Excellencies, UNIDO is pleased to share the key findings of its flagship report, the Industrial Development Report 2022. It analyzes the impact of the COVID-19 crisis on all levels, countries, industries, and companies. And this analysis identifies the key factors that give economies resilience. Understanding these factors is essential for informed decision-making, essential to create strategies to effectively prepare for future crises. Industrial development that is inclusive and sustainable builds dynamic, innovative, and people-centered economies. Sustainability creates resilience. This is what we as the international community must strive for. The recovery from the COVID-19 polypandemic, climate change, conflicts, soaring food and energy prices, these are the major challenges in your countries and worldwide. These challenges are not small, but they can be solved in global cooperation and solidarity, and in global responsibility. As the Director General of UNIDO, I am committed to making UNIDO an even stronger partner in fighting poverty and hunger, fighting climate change, and in creating jobs. We stand with you. We will do our part. I look forward to seeing what new industrial and innovation policy ideas come from your discussions to make sure we see a green recovery in the Asia and Pacific region. I wish you all success. Thank you so much.
thank the Director General of UNIDO for this excellent introduction of the side event. And as the DG has just highlighted, the IDR 2022 brings new insights into how the pandemic has affected the industrial sector and what are the prospects for future of industrialization as economies recover from the crisis. I will now give the floor to Mr. Nobuya Araguchi, who will present the main findings of the report. Dear Nobuya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alejandro. Okay. The Industrial Development Report 2022, this investigates the COVID-19 impact on global industry and the prospects for post-pandemic recovery in view of ongoing megatrends. Building on this analysis, the report provides policy recommendations and a call for action to advocate for an inclusive and sustainable industrial recovery. My presentation follows these key 4 questions, which reflects the content of the report. The first question, what was the global and regional impact of the COVID-19 crisis? 2, why did some countries do better? 3, what can we expect for the future? And 4, how can we build a better future? The first question, what was the global and regional impact of the COVID-19 crisis? The COVID-19 crisis had profound socioeconomic impacts at the global level. World GDP fell by 3.3%. That was the deepest global recession in 70 years. And we have lost 255 million jobs only in 2020. And more profoundly, 97 million more people are estimated to live in extreme poverty due to the pandemic. As you see in the figure, if we have continued the trend we observed before the pandemic, we should have reached at the end of the dotted line. But due to the severe impact of the pandemic in 2020, now we are at the end of the solid line. So the IMF estimate indicate the world GDP is still 4.2% below the level projected for 2021. But not all regions were affected equally. We have industrialized economies marked by green bars and developing and emerging industrial economies marked by blue bars. As you see, on average, developing and emerging industrial economies had more severe impact than countries in industrial economies. And within developing economies, especially small island developing states and India were severely impacted. And those which are less impacted are South and Central Asia, except for India and China. And also Asia, impact was very heterogeneous. Within the group of industrial economies, West Asia had more impact, much higher than average. And East and Southeast Asia had less impact than the average. Within the group of developing and emerging industrial economies, as I said, India's impact was very high, much higher than the average. And also Asian least developed countries and Southeast Asia had more impact, higher impact than the average. On the other hand, South and Central Asia, except for India and China, were less impacted. Within the industrial sector, the impacts were highly heterogeneous across industries, firms, and workers, both globally and in Asia. This is a summary table which present our evidence included in IDR report. At industry level, health industries survived better. They not only survived better, but often performed better than usual because of the higher demand for health products. And information technology related industries performed better. And also industries producing essential goods such as food, paper, also had better performance than others. In contrast, labor-intensive industries producing non-essential goods, especially those which were integrated in global value chains, had severe impacts of the COVID-19. At farm level, large farms did better than small and medium enterprise and informal farms. Digitally advanced farms had higher performance than digitally backward farms, and also farms with high production capabilities survived better than farms with low production capabilities. And male and formal workers survived better. In contrast, female, youth, temporary, and informal workers had to bear the brunt of the impact of COVID-19. Impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on Asian farms' profits. Here we see SMEs versus large farms. This is based on our own survey. And farms' profits were strongly impacted in Asia, around 25% declines on average. And as you see, the impact was much larger in SMEs than in large farms, 32% against 10%. But in all cases, Asian farms reported smaller losses than farms in other developing regions. But the regional average masks important differences across regions within Asia. As you see, farms in China systematically reported lower losses than in the rest of Asia. Farms in South Asia and in Asian least developed countries reported largest losses. And these patterns are also observed when looking at the impact by size categories. SME farms, especially in South Asia and Asian LDCs, had much higher impact than the counterpart large farms in these regions. The impact of the COVID on jobs. Similarly, differences are observed in terms of job layoffs. Farms in China systematically reported lower layoffs than in the rest of Asia. And farms in South Asia and in Asian LDCs reported the largest losses in employment. And this pattern is also observed when looking at the impact by size categories. Why did some countries do better? The report explored different factors that amplified or reduced the crisis impact. At the overall level, macro level, caused the severity of the pandemic and countries' coping measures made difference in terms of the impact of the COVID-19 on countries. And also countries' supply and demand conditions, such as disruptions of operations and shortages and higher cost of inputs, shortages of cash flow and resources. On demand side, changes in customers' preferences, peaks and falls of demand, uncertainty for investments. At country level, degree of integration with global market, importance of domestic market, physical space to implement support policies, and government and industrial capabilities. Sector level, degree of essentiality, industrial structure, whether they have more vulnerable or robust industries, relevance in addressing emergency and labor intensity. And firm characteristics include firm size, liquidity, GVC integration, level of digitalization, human capital, and skills, technological and production capabilities and informalities. So all these factors had impact on the level of firm resilience, defined as robustness, that is the ability to maintain operating capacity, and readiness, that is the ability to have strategic changes and adapt to new environment. Among these different factors at different level from macro to micro, two stand out: the level of industrial capabilities of countries and level of digitalization of manufacturing firms. Both of these have been key in driving resilience during the pandemic. Countries with stronger industrial capabilities were more resilient to the economic impact. Here, level of industrial capabilities is proxied by UNIDO's Competitiveness Industrial Performance Index, which includes 140 countries. And we looked at different factors like pandemic-specific factors like severity of pandemic, stringency of containment measures, as well as country structural factors such as income level and domestic market size and so on. And among these, as you see, the level of countries' industrial capabilities are the most important factor softening the impact of the crisis. Factors below zero means they are associated with lower impact. So level of industrial capabilities was able to mitigate the impact of the COVID-19 most among these factors. Digitally advanced manufacturing firms were more resilient than the rest during the COVID-19 pandemic. Here, digitally advanced firms is defined as firms using the latest vintages of digital technologies in production. We collected inputs from 4,000 firms in 26 developing and emerging industrial economies in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. In all three dimensions of sales, profits, and employment, digitally advanced firms suffered lower impacts than the rest. Both in terms of industrial capabilities and industrial digitalization, Asia is well positioned. Here, first looking at industrial capabilities, again, we looked at our competitive industrial performance index. As you see, both LDC group and also developing and emerging industrial economy group, Asian firms had much higher CIP score. That means they had higher industrial capabilities, more than the double of the firms in Africa and Latin America. And also looking at the level of digitalization, here we looked at the use of advanced digital production technologies. And advanced digital production technologies means that combines digital generations 3.0 and 4.0. As you see, average ADP shares in Asia are larger than in other regions. But of course, there is still a huge gap to cover. There are a large share of firms using analog technology and very old digital technologies, even in Asia. What can we expect for the future? The long-term impact of COVID-19 depends on its interplay with ongoing megatrends likely to shape the future of industrialization. The report identified three important trends. First, digitalization, and automation of industrial production. This affects essentially all spheres of business development and deeply changes the competitive advantages of firms and nations. Second, global economic power shifts. Emergence of Asia as a dominant hub of the world, especially China's structural transformation towards a knowledge-driven high-income economy. These developments imply a major restructuring of trade flows and global value chains. And third, the greening of industrial production. This calls for radically different business models and systemic transformations with far-reaching effects on the positioning of developing and emerging industrial economies in the world economy. These trends were operating already 10, 20 years before COVID-19. Here we used 3 global indicators to illustrate these points. First, looking at the world industrial robot density, robots per 1,000 workers. Here, as you see, last 20 years, this density has increased rapidly. And Asia-Pacific developing regions share in world manufacturing value added that has increased 30 percentage points last 20 years. And finally, world industrial CO2 emissions per unit of manufacturing value added that has been declining quite rapidly last 10 years. And COVID-19 seems to have accelerated some of these trends. COVID-19 did not alter a trend we observed before the pandemic, but it seems to have accelerated some of these trends. In this regard, we collected data from developing regions. And as you see, we see firms have increased, well, firms introduced new technologies to face pandemic. Around 37% of the surveyed firms said that they started or increased business activity online, and around 20% of the surveyed firms said they introduced new equipment for automation. And Asian firms are more prone to reignite post-pandemic investments. We asked questions whether firms are expecting to increase post-pandemic investments. More than half of the surveyed Asian firms said that they will increase investment in new equipment and also in software. These figures are much higher than the firms in other regions. And also, more than 80% of the firms expect greener practices post-COVID-19. We asked questions whether firms are expecting to adopt environmentally friendly practices. Around 31% of the firms said yes to great extent, and 51% said moderate extent. In total, around 80% of the firms expect greener practices post-COVID-19. And how can we build a better future? Efforts should be coordinated at the local and global levels to achieve a recovery that enables a safer development path. We need to align industrial policies with the Building Back Better strategies in order to put the policies to work for the achievement of the SDGs, taking into account the megatrends which are likely to shape the future of industrialization and the tangible risk of global disasters like the COVID-19 pandemic. These policies should promote a recovery that is green, inclusive, and resilient. And of course, these can only be achieved with the support of the international community. Industrial policies to promote a green, inclusive and resilient recovery. First, green industrial policy should simultaneously target demand and supply. For the demand side, we need to shift consumer behavior through demand-side instruments. For the supply side, we have to provide incentives to improve farms' resource and energy efficiency and promote green innovation. Inclusive industrial policy should support the actors which are particularly vulnerable. At farm level, SMEs, we need to facilitate the uptake of new technologies and promote market diversification. At worker level, female, youth, and informal workers, we need to enhance safety net provision and support employability of these vulnerable workers. Industrial policy should also strengthen the resilience of countries against future risks. Prevention. We have to build awareness and foster knowledge creation and exchange about new and existing risks. As for preparedness, we need to support farms' integration of industry vulnerability data, monitoring, and evaluation mechanisms. How can we build a better future? The report included a call for action to the international community to support an inclusive and sustainable and resilient industrial recovery. Over the short term, the international community must address vaccine rollout and access and need to eliminate export restrictions and promote technology transfer for health-related products. Over the medium to long term, the international community should coordinate efforts to expand the policy space for developing countries. The recapitalization of development banks would be the key in this regard. Also, for the development of industrial policy capabilities would be necessary for countries to develop the strategies that address country-specific conditions and sustain better recovery and future development. Furthermore, the international community needs to help countries accelerate technology transfer in digital and low-carbon technologies while supporting them to strengthen their own capabilities through upgrading education, science, and technology capabilities. Finally, resilience to external shocks can be enhanced by fostering local productive capabilities in strategic industries such as health, pharmaceutical industries, and by mainstreaming risk management tools within industrial policy practices. Multilateral and multi-stakeholder collaboration must be the cornerstone of strategies for recovery and the future of industrialization in a post-pandemic world. Countries and organizations must share their knowledge and experiences for the road to recovery and better future and ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nobuya, for this excellent summary on the main findings and messages emerging from the IDR 2022. Now, taking the summary as the background, we will move to the second part of this session, in which a panel of prominent experts will discuss these findings in the context of the Asia-Pacific region. So it is my pleasure to present to you the members of the panel. First of all, we have Ms. Rafaelita Aldaba, who is the Undersecretary for the Competitiveness and Innovation Group of the Philippine Department of Trade and Industry. Then we have Ms. Eng Netra, who is the Executive Director of the Cambodia Development Resource Institute from Cambodia. Next, we have Mr. Sachin Chaturvedi, who is Professor and Director General at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries from India. And finally, we have Mr. Dato Gan, who is the Vice President of the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers from Malaysia. So we have a very nice panel, and now we would like to discuss the findings of the report in the context of the Asia-Pacific region. And to do so, let me start posing the first question to Undersecretary Aldaba. First of all, welcome Undersecretary Aldaba to this webinar. And first of all, we would like to ask you if you could share the experience of the Philippines in dealing with the COVID pandemic. And in particular, we would like to hear from you what have been the most effective policies that your government implemented to support industry during the crisis, and what have been the most effective policies implemented also to support the recovery so far. So, Ms. Aldaba, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. Please, I think you have to.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to those in Bangkok, and good evening to those here in Manila. And thank you so much for this opportunity to share. The UNIDO 2022 IDR actually mirrors the pandemic experience of the Philippines, as well as many developing countries. And I support the emphasis on the heterogeneity of the pandemic's impact. And indeed, while the impact of the pandemic has generally been sharp and swift, the capacity of economies or groups in society to cope up with the impact has been varied. The pandemic has exposed the persistent structural issues, which were the predetermining factors of the pace of adaptation, whether the lack of diversification of global supply chains or the lack of investments in digital skills and infrastructure. I also agree with the report that countries with stronger manufacturing systems weathered the crisis better. And the pandemic highlighted that manufacturing is a nation-defining capability, especially during times of crisis. A clear example, for instance, is countries with limited local capacities had difficulties in securing PPEs and other COVID critical products. And in the Philippines, we implemented a manufacturing repurposing program to shift companies' operations to the production of PPEs. Garments and electronics companies transformed part of their operations for the manufacturing of masks, coveralls, ventilators, and even liquor companies in the country shifted to the production of alcohol. Well, as almost all economic activities went digital, companies with existing investments in digital technologies and digital capabilities were first to adopt and quick to pivot to new offerings and services. And I would also want to emphasize that people become more innovative during crisis periods. Using new technologies, Filipino startups have been providing support to government through contact tracing apps, personal and community health monitoring, chatbots, along with apps for social distancing and online marketplaces. Innovative startups also emerged to provide tech solutions to address issues in agriculture, education, finance, multimedia, supply chain, and logistics. And let me also note that digital capabilities have been a deterministic aspect of the ability to weather the crisis. As the IDR pointed out, enterprises with digitally advanced technologies registered less monthly and yearly profit losses and less reductions in employment as they were able to adapt better. As a Filipino electronics company indicated, had it not been for their smart factory that they built shortly before the pandemic, the impact of the crisis would have been far much worse. And I would also want to mention the IDR's forward-looking insights towards shaping industrial policies to be more inclusive and sustainable. The IDR has identified digitalization, industrial greening, and the global power shift towards Asia as the mega trends that will influence industrialization in the post-pandemic future. And to me, these are key areas in which industrial policy has played a crucial role, especially in ensuring shared prosperity for all and that no one is left behind. The pandemic has actually provided an impetus to fast-track the adoption of Industry 4.0 technologies and innovation with greater focus on resilience and sustainability. In the post-pandemic landscape, Industry 4.0, we believe, and this is also actually a part of our industrial policy, will play a crucial role in ensuring survival of more companies and organizations, shortening adaptation and recovery phase of businesses and organizations, and helping them resume normal operations as quickly as possible, and providing platforms to develop new, more resilient products, processes, systems, and operations in the medium to long term. Even prior to the pandemic, the Philippine industrial policy is being driven by science, technology, and innovation with a goal of growing and developing globally competitive and innovative industries. Our industrial policy focuses on embracing Industry 4.0 technologies. Through the use and adoption of new technologies, we can strengthen the competitiveness, resilience, and sustainability of our industries. Our strategy also emphasizes the need for companies to innovate, integrate into digital economy, form industry clusters, and pursue global and regional collaboration. We also highlight the importance of reskilling and upskilling our workforce, the need for the academe and training providers to adopt programs to meet the demand for talent created by these new technologies. We are also strengthening our government, academe, industry collaboration, as well as our partnership with international development partners and the global community as we address challenges and make the most of the advantages brought about by these technological developments. We do not want the adoption of new technologies to widen the digital divide, and hence we adopt a whole-of-nation approach as we implement our industrial policy, especially in investing in human capital and rethinking of transition support for enterprises and workers to be affected by the digital transformation that the country is pursuing. And lastly, we believe that new technologies like artificial intelligence are not here to destroy jobs or replace humans, but to create new jobs and change what work looks like, to augment human intelligence and skills and make our workplaces safer. Our industrial policy keeps the people at the center of all our fourth industrial transformation plans, with focus on inclusive growth and enabling people at every level of society to take part in building an innovative and creative future. Thank you very much. I think I'm going to stop there. Maybe I could elaborate later.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aldaba, for this excellent reflection on the Philippine experience. And it's reassuring that you are confirming some of the key findings from the IDR, especially the importance of building industrial capabilities for resilience and also building digital capabilities for resilience. It's very interesting also this manufacturing repurposing program that you have mentioned that has been implemented in the Philippines during the crisis. And also the emphasis on digital technologies, something that we also have stressed in the report, but taking into consideration this aspect of trying to avoid the digital divide. And we think that is key. And we look forward to learning more about the Philippine experience on this matter. But let me now move to the second question that we have. In this case, we will move to our next speaker, Ms. Netra. And the question that we're going to pose to you is also related to something that Ms. Aldaba has just mentioned, that is that the COVID-19 pandemic had a very heterogeneous impact, not only across countries, but also within countries across industries. And in particular, something that the report highlights is that labor-intensive industries, such as, for example, garment, has suffered more the impact than other industries. And even within particular industries, there were some workers that have been impacted much more than others. And what we have found in the report is that female and informal workers have been impacted the most. So in this context, what we wanted to ask you is, based on your experience in the particular case of Cambodia, how did these actors, which have been the most vulnerable, in particular women garment workers, cope with the crisis? And what type of policies can be implemented to support the recovery in the post-pandemic period? So, Ms. Netra, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all from Phnom Penh, Cambodia. I am going to share some of the ongoing work that CDI, my team, has been working on, kind of documents and monitor the impact of COVID on the female worker, especially in the garment sector. Garment sector is quite significant in Cambodia economy, in that it's contribute almost 20% to the GDP, and it represents almost 80% of our export. And most of the workers are young female Cambodian, often migrate from rural to urban city that kind of has factories. So some of this work that we've been documenting over time have suggested that the most important impact on this almost 1 million female workers in the garment sector are significant reduction of income, and significant means quite a lot, like from almost 30 to 40% reductions of their monthly income during COVID, and that has implications on a whole lot of livelihood, both for them at the individual, but also to the family in the rural area. So we observe that during the COVID lockdown, they have to reduce food consumption and also non-food consumptions. And in order to cope with the reductions of income, they have deal with this through 3 strategies. The first one is to use up their saving for a worker who has some saving. But for some who does not have saving, they take up a loan, extra loan, new loans, and usually through micro finance borrowing. The second thing is to ask for help from relatives, from peers, from friends. So that also involve borrowing as well, or just kind of short-term request or assistance. And the third coping strategies is the government. The Cambodian government has quickly rolled out the cash transfer for garment workers that were suspended from work because of their factory closed down, or for worker who has reduced working hours. So that was quite significant support from the government to kind of as additional assistance to them. The other important aspect to the impact from COVID is that on the household is that because of reduction of income, they also reduce their transfer to a family back home, and that's through remittance, reduction of remittance. And what we observe in the observations in our study is that the family also affected through reductions of food and non-food consumptions. And the implications on the female garment worker in Cambodia during COVID has also been quite significant in terms of their physical and mental health well-being. I think one important aspect to reflect is that during lockdown and the school closure, they are increasingly demanded on pressure to put more time into the care, domestic care and unpaid work, and that has significant implications on their well-being in general to the female worker that we observe and monitor during those periods. An important aspect from the our study also show that for worker with a family that has income from farming, agriculture, seem to cope better than a worker or family do not have income from agriculture or kind of farming activity. So that it kind of say a lot about the significant role of agriculture of a rural economy in Cambodia in supporting a worker in time of difficult and crisis like the COVID pandemics. So this is going to be an important sector, I think, moving forward now that we are looking also the other aspect that the report pointing out this kind of technological changes, the IR 4.0, but also the implication from climate change and the green economy is that the Cambodian rural household is likely to combine income from diverse sources that are maybe better support them in time of difficulty, and that we observe a household who has members that are able to combine income from farming, from work through this kind of digital application. Because of during COVID, I think there was also a substantial increase in the food delivery and online shopping, things like that. So you got a larger number of workers recruited or absorbed from the other most affected industry like garments and tourism into those digital platform, and also other off-farm employment. So you see a combination of rural kind of traditional sources of income in rice farming toward also more kind of digital app-based income generation, and that we observe this to be an important mechanism for coping to a lot of these household families and workers as well. So for what I think moving forward into kind of link a bit more to the report and what we at CDI is also doing but hasn't been yet released, is we also doing our own surveys of the Cambodia small, medium and large enterprise about how they cope, for their future plans, and also the forward looking on how they are preparing to adapt to these technologies and the industrial revolution that coming up. For us, want to look forward to is that Cambodian need to better prepare and better support the micro and small businesses, and these are often also female owned enterprise, and currently they are a bit isolated from the medium and large enterprise that are, as the report find out, that better prepared and better integrated into the kind of new mega trends. So that connection, that support for the micro and small enterprise in Cambodia is going to be significant for Cambodia moving forward, and to recover that are more equitable and fairly distributed, especially to the marginalized and female owned enterprise. The second point I would like to raise is also that the these the social protections that the Cambodian government has kind of rolled out in addressing these the urgent needs during COVID is really important, need to continue, but further expanded as we kind of discussed. The impact from COVID was not just on the worker, it was on their children, on their parents, and the household as a whole. So it needs to be further expanded and further considered so that targeted and support are not only for worker but to the family as a whole and over the kind of longer term forward-looking strategies as well. The third final point I would like to raise, I think just like this female garment worker were struggling to make ends meet during the crisis that caused by COVID, in our survey at the same time, they also don't know what to do next. What are opportunities, what are skills that they need if there were no other job to go back to in the garment sector. And that raised the questions about agenda for reskilling and upskilling to the female garment worker, and more importantly too, to kind of integrate them into this enabling environment for becoming entrepreneur themselves and you know, kind of taking up opportunities that may be presented by these mega trends that's coming up too. Yes, so I would like to finish my intervention here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Netra, for this very interesting reflection on the Cambodia situation, and in particular how the pandemic has hit the most vulnerable female workers in the garment sector. And also thank you for the reflections on the way forward and what are important factors that need to be tackled in order to support them in the recovery times. I think in a similar line as Ms. Aldaba, you were referring to the importance of digitalization and building these digital skills, and also creating new opportunities for these female workers as they are being laid off from the garment sector. They need to find new opportunities in other sectors. And in order to achieve that, they need to be reskilled and prepare for the new technologies that are shaping the industrial landscape. So thank you very much for the reflections. And then if we would have time, we will probably go back to some of the elements that you were posing in your intervention. So let me now move to our next panelist, who is bringing a perspective from another part of Asia. And this will be our Professor Chaturvedi. Professor, thank you, welcome, and thank you very much for participating in this event. And what we wanted to ask you was specifically on India, the country that you probably know best. And as Nobuya has mentioned, according to the latest estimates by the IMF, India has been one of the countries most impacted by the pandemic, at least in terms of GDP growth revisions. So in this relation, we wanted to ask you two questions. The first one is, why do you think India has been impacted so deeply, at least the Indian economy? And the second one is, how do you think the socioeconomic resilience of India could be strengthened in view of future crises of this nature that might emerge? So thank you very much, Professor. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Andrew, for giving us this opportunity and connecting with you as we go forward. I congratulate UNIDO and ESCAP for getting this opportunity, but to UNIDO for the IDRO 2022, which focuses on some very important mega trends that we are witnessing in our society now, both in terms of science, technology, innovation, the way we see industrial policy and technology connected, and how we see the recovery actually happening. And that, I think, is much more important at this point of time than how it was impacted. And I think that's where the larger process is of great significance, because that's where I think the larger crux lies in terms of how our argument in our strategies would go. And as we we saw the industrial capacities, and as Dr. Netra pointed out, industrial capacities during the COVID were affected. And we heard in the report also in terms of how this understanding actually required us to revisit the industrial setup that was there, and how pre-COVID that proved out to be a strength. We heard that from Dr. Andra as well, in terms of how within Philippines it helped in terms of taking the task forward. So what we heard from Cambodia, what we heard from Philippines, I think is equally important for all the countries in terms of how well they were prepared pre-COVID, not exactly for pandemics, but for an adverse situation, which I think your report has captured very well in terms of strengthening the linkages that are there at the sectoral level. When you say sectoral composition of economy, if it is too much tourism oriented or service sector oriented, the impact would be high, and the jobs or the focus on manufacturing. And this, I think, Andrew, is something that is extremely important for us to identify, both in terms of how governments went out of their way to support manufacturing, in what way they helped soften the impact of COVID, and in what way they picked up the idea of digitalization or shifting towards manufacturing base, and also the greening, which is also emphasized. And I think all the three levels are important in terms of we determining the level of industrialization. The criticality of it, Alejandro, really works in terms of, as the report has rightly emphasized, in terms of how we go for SDGs, in what way that enabled us to go forward. And that's what I wanted to pick up here in terms of how industrial and technology policy and their interlinkages appeared in India, in what way the post-COVID situation. Now we are seeing more and more coordinated action, and I'm also on the board of the Central Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India. So the monetary policy and the fiscal policy, their convergence was equally important. So the coordinated action between public and within public, with the finance and the monetary people, the industrial and technology people, and the private sector's take on that, their contribution, they all were extremely important in terms of how we went forward and in what way we required the agencies and the institutions to work together. That was also, I think, extremely important in terms of how the report has rightly captured Alejandro, and I must congratulate for highlighting the manufacturing connect with the socio-economic resilience. And I think the section that has highlighted the question as to why manufacturing matters for socio-economic resilience is something which is extremely evident. And in a report at a couple of places, you have referred to India. And I think the reference to migration has come up. So the regions which are excluded from having the manufacturing sector, you find a huge socio-economic deficit in the resilience. But let me also take this opportunity to highlight, Alejandro, a couple of points which have emerged now in the post-COVID scenario far more in a robust manner, and how encouraging they are. India now is the only country where, among the mega economies, where inflation is in the negative zone. If you look at US, if you look at EU, if you look at China and all other big economies, you find that the inflation has been extremely high. In India, we are now able to manage inflation within the range that is there. And this is largely because of a couple of factors. And there, I think the report could have captured a couple of details, which I think they were spread across. And I see in almost more than 40 places India as a reference has come up in the report, and I found one or two boxes quite interesting. But first and foremost would be the jump that we have seen in the engineering goods exports from India. It has already crossed $10 billion, and the jump is of 33%. And that, Andrew, is largely the effect of the Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat that we are calling. That scheme has given a huge impetus. And I would very much like to point out to you the new initiative that India launched under the government's leadership is of the Production Linked Incentive Scheme, PLI scheme, under which 13 sectors were covered, $26.7 billion. $26.7 billion have been provided in form of a booster to industry, and that has given a huge impetus. Now India's growth that IMF has predicted is at 7.5%, though our central bank, the Reserve Bank of India, is expecting only 7.2%. But this jump is showing the resilience of Indian economy, the ability to bounce back, and you find that manufacturing in 21-22 jumped almost by 210%, which report has not captured. So this 210% jump in the manufacturing shows how India coped up with the supply chain disruption at the global level. Imports from China stopped, and that has helped our economy. We were never producing PPE, but we have emerged as one of the leading producers of PPE, and we exported all across the world. Vaccines, India was one of the front runners of vaccine production. We were the leaders in terms of how we produce. And can you believe the number of our startups that has gone up from 1,600 to 2,250? That's the bandwidth, Alejandro, that we have covered. And the startups could raise $24.1 billion in this period of COVID crisis. So when IDRO 2022 is talking about the crisis and how countries are hit, I think it should also have captured the successes that we are seeing in Indian market. This jump from 1,600 to 2,250 with the capital of $24.1 billion is a grand success story. We have emerged as one of the major exporters of pharmaceutical products, the vaccines, as I said, but then a whole spectrum of generics and biopharma expansion that has taken place. And this, I think, is a testimony to the preparedness, what Dr. Nitra mentioned and Dr. Aradeba also mentioned in terms of how we were prepared pre-COVID. So there, I really want to bring to your attention our ability to bring huge number of people within the formal banking system, something that we launched under the leadership of the Prime Minister Modi in 2014, to have bank account for every Indian. Bank account for every Indian. 262.5 million people. 262.5 million people, new bank accounts were opened for them. And this was extremely helpful during the COVID crisis, because very targeted, very specific subsidy support was given to them, the direct benefit transfers that were given. So we could target whom to give, and as a result, we are now not having huge inflation problem. You look at the United States of America. Just on Friday, the Fed's statement, which has taken away huge billions of dollars from the US market, now they are struggling with the inflation, because huge liquidity has been pumped in. In India, we avoided that kind of pumping in. We remained very specific and very targeted, something that your report has observed in case of South Korea. But that mention for India is missing from the report. You have said for South Korea, targeted and integrated approach has helped. I feel that same strategy we had in India, and that is why we could bounce back with industrial and economic growth. Now India is one of the leading global economy with the highest economic growth rate. And to say that we were worst hit is not truly the right picture. And we find that manufacturing has expanded. In fact, if you look at digitalization, the digital transactions in India have crossed 71.95 billion transactions, 71.95 billion transactions, which are higher than US, China, Germany, all three put together. We crossed digital transactions in terms of that. And in fact, what was being transacted in 2017 was only $282 million in India. And now it stands at $1.5 billion. So this, Alandre, shows the quantum and the size that that India has actually crossed. So you find multiple levels of interactions which have given new boost to India's startup, technology, economy, and the convergence of monetary and fiscal policy. So all the 360-degree advancement that has happened has been in short. So India's COVID handling is handling of a process that stands in the category of good governance. It brings in responsible and targeted inclusive strategy where we could bring in people with marginalized sections of society, but we could also provide input to industrial and economic production. And that is why you are seeing rise in the engineering exports, but India is also the basket of the country. So several countries where after the aggression of the Russia, the bread baskets were derailed, the supplies were derailed. India now is the leading wheat exporter, paddy provider to several countries. So that way, agriculture, manufacturing, and engineering, all three have been taken care of. As I said, the central bank, where I am also sitting, we are trying to provide enough liquidity in the market without causing too much concerns about inflation. So that way, I think industry, economy, employment have been beneficial for the economy. And that has given a major boost to the issues and questions that the report has raised. Before I close, I must also mention that the whole issue that we are trying to address in terms of global coordinated action, I think that's all, extremely important. Given the preparedness for India's G20 presidency next year and the actions that are needed, we are trying to see how best industrial policy and industrial policy related science, technology, innovation are to be combined. And that, I think, Alejandro, would be extremely important for us to see how this convergence happens. Somehow, during the Washington Consensus years, the relevance of industrial policy was relegated. But the COVID crisis has brought back the relevance of industrial policy, something that UNIDO stood for all this while. And I'm so glad that this IDRO has placed back the industrial policy case, but I really wish it should have also punched in with technology policy. Though among the mega trends, it talks about, but I think we need manufacturing, industrial policy, science, technology, innovation, STI, all the three combined together, but also juxtaposing over the global financing patterns. And that I think somehow finances have not been coming. And that's the fourth arm of this, which somehow is missing. But I would very much like to emphasize on that point, and with that I would close. Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Chaturvedi, thank you very much for this very illuminating intervention. And we think it was especially interesting the reflection you did on the India case. In the report, actually, we try to define resilience as a combination of robustness, so the ability to absorb the shock, and readiness to respond. And I think what you have highlighted today, and is very interesting, is this readiness to respond from India, which actually now takes it such a interesting growth rate in the industrial sector, but also in the economy, with low inflation. That, as you mentioned, this is key for sustaining this growth rate. And finally, your reflection on future industrial policies and the need to coordinate industrial policies with innovation policies, but also with macro policies, and to find the ways of financing these policies is key. And this is, in fact, something that we would like to explore further from UNIDO, from the research department. So we will very much welcome any input you might have on this, and we can come back on this later. So thank you very much, Professor Chaturvedi. And you also mentioned the importance of coordinating with the private sector, which in fact brings us very well to our next speaker, Mr. Dato' Gan from the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers, to whom we would like to pose the following question, that is, what role did the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers play during the COVID-19 pandemic, and whether you have seen a change in the role that the Federation played before the pandemic and after, or during and after the pandemic. So, Mr. Dato' Gan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Alejandro. Yes, thank you. My name is Gan. I'm from the FMM, and the FMM stands for Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers. So what we are an organization with more than 10,000 members, and we have 6,000 and more indirect members, and we have 3,000 over direct members. So our job is to provide service to all these members companies, and as much as 25% of these companies are multinationals, and the rest are mostly SMEs. Now the question is the role of FMM towards its members before and after COVID-19. Now this has in fact critically affected the speed of the information updates which we have to give it to our members. As every company has actually faced with this unprecedented situation of a global lockdown, which resulted in a major disruption to the supply chains. And it's also disrupted the business operation for many of the companies. The restrictions of this operation was only for the essential services, which actually affected the whole supply chain. The importance of FMM to obtain accurate and quick information to be disseminated to the industry is a very crucial part which FMM has to play. The reason why is because the policy of the government kept changing, and that is the reason that we have to update members on all these issues. Now, for instance, only 37 types of business in the 5 essential sectors were allowed to operate, while the non-essential sectors, comprising of 80% of all business, were not allowed. So you do have an issue whereby multinationals or companies who are classified under essential sectors, they're not able to get raw materials or raw supplies from the companies of non-essentials. Now, from the FMM survey, the impact on the MCO, which we conducted from June 5th to June 10th, the feedbacks on the majority of the businesses has faced immediate reduction in sales. Many of the companies were having problems with sales. Exports, cash flow was a problem. There was an increase in operational costs, which includes logistic costs. And because of that, there's a huge backlog in the export, which led to the penalties of late delivery. So on that note, under phase 2 and 3 of the EMCO, many of the companies were faced with higher costs to supply the material. And also there were shorter credit periods for companies. And as a result, there was a loss of foreign market share. Now, FMM continues its advocacy, the role of focusing on specific recommendation to most industries and employees by proposing various incentives and support, such as loan moratorium, enabling companies to pay at a later stage, right? And there were also wage subsidies. Discussion will, with the central bank, look into the issue of enabling companies to pay employees not more than 500 with a wage of 600 ringgit. But there were also specific assistance to SMEs in terms of relief funds with lower interest rates. And this is actually done with the combined effort of Bank Negara together with FMM, having dialogue sessions with them to enable to look into the problems of the finance issue. Now, between July to June 2022, we have also provided a total of 55 advisory services on the latest COVID requirements and also its announcement. Now, due to COVID-19 pandemic crisis, there was definitely a great sense of urgency for companies, especially SMEs, to accelerate their digital strategies, to adapt to the new normal, to maintain sustainability, competitiveness, and respond quickly to rapid market demands. There was a need to accelerate digitalization over a very short span of time and over a wide area of manufacturing activities, processes, and FMM played and continue to play an active role in providing necessary assistance to members through its active role in the Government Industry 4.0 policy and initiatives, as well as provide members with the necessary exposure on technology and digitalization solution via webinar sessions. We also tried offering reskilling and upskilling training programs via our FMM training arm and the FMM product and services catalog Industry 4.0 solution providers, which is a directory of the Malaysian leading Industry 4.0. I think that's about it, that I need to talk about the local issues with the Malaysian government and the FMM together with the companies, with our companies. So what we do is we act as an intermediary between the government and also the companies and offer as much help and assistance to the companies are concerned. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gan, for this very interesting perspective from the private sector, which I think highlights once again the importance of strong partnerships between the private sector and the public sector, not only when it comes to dealing with the crisis, but also when looking forward. And you were mentioning the importance of 4.0 policy and also trainings and reskillings of the labor force. Those are the areas in which the private sector can actually help and inform a lot the process of policy making and decision taking. So thank you very much. And now I will ask all panelists if they can turn on their cameras so we can have some final round of remarks. Unfortunately, the time went very quickly, so we will only have 2 minutes for each of the panelists for a final reflections. Dr. Netra had to leave already, so we will have the other 3 speakers. And let me start first with Ms. Aldaba. Ms. Aldaba, please, if you have some final remarks, 2 minutes. Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yeah, this is a really a very, very interesting session. Well, I would just want to highlight that the crisis has presented new Industry 4.0 opportunities that we can leverage to discover new, better, and more resilient ways of doing things. And enterprises which have greater innovation emerged resilient, and they even recorded gains amidst the economic slowdown. So digital technologies and innovation, they have played a crucial role in ensuring quick responses to the crisis. And as the race for survival intensifies, more innovation would emerge and the less innovative firms would fall behind. And third, it's not only the innovative firms that survived, the more resilient firms thrived during the crisis. And so now resilience to external shocks is seen as a competitive advantage. And as we enter the new normal, firms are tailoring production and supply systems to changing consumer behavior. And this requires agility in production and supply systems enabled by advanced technology and automated processes at the same time. So there's a need to adopt new ways of working to increase resilience. And all this need industrial policy. They need shared responsibility and collaboration between industry, academe, and government, as well as the international community. So in the Philippines, to be able to accelerate our economic recovery and achieve sustainable, inclusive, and resilient industrial transformation and development, we are pursuing an industrial policy that is science, technology, and innovation-based. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Aldaba, for these final remarks. And let me now give the floor to Mr. Chaturvedi, if you want to have some final remarks, please.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Alejandro. I think the overall challenge lies in adopting right strategies based on insights that have emerged. The question really is to what extent we see convergence with the three mega trends that the report has highlighted, and in what way we see the divergences. How those divergences come in, and to what extent governments and others can make, particularly international agencies, can make efforts to ensure contextualization that the mega trends remain on track in the national governments. So to what extent we need to see that the mega trends always remain aligned with one another, and in the countries that are not in front leading, as the report mentions. And I think for digitalization and industrialization and capacities, the skilling and the reskilling that would be required in new settings, I think would be extremely important. And this all the new developing countries or new industrializing countries do not have the luxury of carbon on their front. So they have to do it with low carbon. They have to do with greening of industry. They have to do it when the carbon footprint is much lesser. So in what way we can really work this out, in what way we can really identify these priorities, I think, Alejandro, that is extremely important. And from that perspective, probably we would have to see the UNIDO report and strategies more in terms of the convergences that are needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chaturvedi, for this very interesting reflection. And let me now give the floor to Mr. Datogan, please, if you want to say some final words. The floor is yours. I think you're probably mute, if you can.
Yeah, I just want to say that when government locked down the economy, I think it's essential that have to look into the companies who are in the essential sectors, and they must study the whole program properly before they actually lock down. This is because the lockdown, many of the essential sectors were not allowed to operate, and they find themselves crippled as their supply chain were not considered as essential, which they cannot operate. So we hope that on our part, we hope that we can address some of these issues whereby the FMM, we can actually launch this, what we call it, the Industrial Linkage Program called ILP. And the primary objective of addressing the disruption that COVID-19 had on supply chain globally. And the current global price inflation is one such example. So I think if we could actually anchor some of these SME suppliers that goes directly to the multinationals, we could actually address some of the supply chain challenges in future, and also give the SME suppliers that could actually grow to the world of class manufacturers. That's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Datogan, for this very interesting final reflection. And let me now give the floor to Mr. Stein Hansen, our Regional Director and UNIDO representative at the Regional Office Hub in Bangkok, to give some closing remarks of the event. Stein, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to all of you. It has been an honor for UNIDO to co-host this event to present the Industrial Development Report 2022, titled The Future of Industrialization in a Post-Pandemic World in Asia Pacific, and to discuss the implications for the region. Let me thank all the panelists and participants for participating in this virtual event. A special thanks go to ESCAP for supporting the preparation of the event and providing a virtual venue on the side of the fourth session of the Committee on Information and Communications Technology, Science, Technology and Innovation. Thanks also to our prominent panelists, Ms. Aldaba, Ms. Netra, Mr. Chaturvedi and Mr. Takong for their valuable insights and stimulating reflections. We have had an excellent discussion on the lessons learned from the pandemic and the courses of action to accelerate industrial development in the Asia-Pacific region post-pandemic. It is vital that we generate more debates like this one between academic experts, policymakers, and private sector at the regional level. New challenges are emerging as countries recover from COVID-19 crisis. Global value chains are being disrupted and there is an escalation of geopolitical tensions. In this international context, resilience has come to the forefront as the IDR stresses building industrial capabilities will be key to strengthen resilience and prepare for these challenges. Another important source of resilience identified in the IDR and discussed during this session has been the digitalization of manufacturing firms. As has been shown in Nobuya's presentation, firms embracing Industry 4.0 have been more resilient to the pandemic shocks than the rest. Digitalization also supported firms' readiness to respond to the crisis. The IDR has shown that digitally advanced firms have been more likely to implement transformational changes, such as increasing online activity, repurposing productive lines, or introducing new equipment to automate production processes. However, the use of these technologies is still extremely concentrated. In Asian countries and in other parts of the world, only few manufacturing firms have been capable of joining the race of Industry 4.0 and apply new digital technologies to their industrial productions. The majority of firms still operate at lower technological levels. The developing and emerging industrial economies in Asia Pacific cannot miss the opportunity of rising their engagement with advanced digital technologies. Even if some countries in the region are already climbing this ladder, the scarce diffusion of digital technologies among firms calls for a deepening of their engagement with advanced digital technologies. To avoid leaving any actor at the margins, of this technological transformation. To develop industrial and digital capabilities, it is necessary to think new industrial policies that promote knowledge-intensive activities and the deployment of new technologies. This is a major task for developing countries around the world, which UNIDO stands ready to support. But isolated efforts will not be enough. Today, more than ever, we need strong partnerships to advance in an inclusive and sustainable development in the region. As the international community, we must cooperate globally to allow progress in achieving these goals. We hope this event serves as a first step in an even stronger collaboration with UN ESCAP. In the future, we can join forces to share experiences and analyze together the type of innovation and industrial policies that are needed to face the new challenges that the region is facing and build back better from the pandemic. I wish you all success, and I thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Stein, for these closing remarks. And this concludes today's side event, which we hope you have enjoyed. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to thank all our speakers for their valuable time and participation in this event. And a special thanks goes to ESCAP and the organizing team of the fourth session of the Committee on Information and Communication, Technology, Science, Technology and Innovation. And we also thank you, all the attendees, for joining this discussion. We hope that you can join to other side events of the conference. And for those who might be interested in learning more about the report, you can find the full report and all materials related to the report at unido.org/IDR 2022. Thank you very much, and we hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.